3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. Last time, we followed the private club pipeline that gave Epstein recruitment access inside elite venues. Today, we go to Paris and the apartment at 22 Avenue Foch, where Epstein ran a European operation that was anything but peripheral. As always, every document and source we reference is available at epsteinfiles.fm. So in October 2010, an email from Epstein's account references his apartment as 22 Tabini Avenue Foch. Ghislaine Maxwell had been coordinating operations there for years, arranging staff interviews as early as 2002, and ensuring things would be ready for his arrivals. The man running it on the ground was a French modeling agent named Jean-Luc Brunel.
And that name, Jean-Luc Brunel, is really the linchpin. It's the key to understanding the international scope of this whole organization.
How so?
Well, when we analyze the Florida operation, for example, we see a much more localized recruitment network. It's contained.
Right. It has its own ecosystem.
Exactly. And New York, that's where we see the blending of social power and, raw financial leverage.
But Paris is different.
Paris is completely different. When we look at the files concerning Paris, specifically this apartment at Avenue Foch and the MC2 modeling agency, we're looking at the supply line.
The logistics hub.
That's the perfect term for it. The documents strongly suggest that Paris wasn't a vacation spot for Epstein. It was a hub for trafficking women and girls across the Atlantic.
Okay, so let's start with the physical asset itself, the apartment, 22 Avenue Foch.
We should probably establish the geography here for anyone not familiar with Paris.
Because this isn't just a nice street. This is not a tourist district.
No, not even close. Avenue Foch is in the 16th arrondissement. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most prestigious and high-security avenues in the entire city.
What does that mean in practical terms? High security.
It means it's home to embassies, consulates, the homes of ultra-high-net-worth individuals who demand and get absolute privacy.
So the neighbors are foreign dignitaries.
Foreign dignitaries, sovereign wealth funds, industrialists. It's arguably the widest avenue in Paris, lined with these huge chestnut trees and massive fortress-like mansions and apartment buildings.
Creates a kind of buffer.
It offers a veil of diplomatic immunity just by association. You don't ask questions on Avenue Foch. The assumption is that whatever is happening behind those doors is powerful and private.
And Epstein wasn't just, renting a suite at the George V. He maintained a permanent residence here.
A permanent controlled asset. And you mentioned that email from October 2010.
The one where he uses the identifier 222BA.
That little code is actually pretty significant from an operational security perspective.
Tuck that down.
Well, 22 is the building number on the street. 2 almost certainly refers to the second floor. And D.
Double doors.
Double doors. It's a specific internal identifier. Not for the building, but for a specific unit inside. It's shorthand his staff would understand immediately.
But the date is what's really critical here. October 2010.
Yes. At this point, Epstein is a registered sex offender in the United States. He's already served that famously lenient sentence in Florida.
There's post-conviction.
His post-conviction. And yet he is actively maintaining this overseas base with this level of granular control. He's not just checking into a hotel. He's signaling to his entire apparatus that he's returning to a facility he owns and controls.
And the management of that facility, that wasn't outsourced. The hands-on involvement of Ghislaine Maxwell is documented years before that 2010 email.
It is. I'm looking at the email correspondence from October 2002. This is where we see the operational hierarchy in black and white.
She wasn't just a social companion.
Oh, not at all. She was the operations manager. The documents show her personally conducting interviews for staff at the Paris location.
And not just hiring a local cleaning service.
No, this is much more specific. The records show her interviewing a Sri Lankan applicant who held French citizenship.
Why would she, Ghislaine Maxwell, handle that specific hire personally from, across the ocean?
Because of the security requirements. Because you need absolute loyalty and discretion. Maxwell's primary directive, as documented, was to ensure things be ready for Epstein's arrival.
And ready, in the context of a forensic analysis of this kind of organization, means more than clean sheets.
It implies a fully maintained facility. It implies a staff that has been vetted, that has probably signed non-disclosure agreements, and that is keenly aware of the specific and often abusive requirements of the owner.
You don't personally interview household staff for a casual vacation rental.
You do it for a secure operational base, a safe house, a place where discretion is the most valuable currency you have.
So we have the secure location established. Now we need to look at the operator on the ground in Paris.
And this brings us right back to Jean-Luc Brunel.
There's an email from March 2015. It's sent from Epstein's account directly to Brunel. It's very brief.
The text is just, saw you walking on Rue Rivoli. Very, very glad you are well. I leave tonight.
On the surface, it sounds casual.
It sounds casual, but what it does is it establishes undeniable physical proximity. It confirms that Epstein and Brunel were in Paris at the exact same time, occupying the same geography. They were moving in the same circles.
But it's the coordination behind the scenes that's more telling.
Far more telling. We have a February 2015 email. This one is from Leslie Groff, who was Epstein's executive assistant in New York, writing directly to Brunel.
So from the New York office to the Paris operator.
Yes. And she informs him of Epstein's upcoming dates in Paris. Specifically, February 28th to March 7th, she's giving him the itinerary.
And Brunel's response is key.
He responds with his own schedule. He writes back that he is in Milano until 4th.
So he'll be back in Paris on March 4th, right in the middle of Epstein's visit.
This is calendar syncing. This demonstrates unequivocally that the New York executive staff were coordinating Epstein's European movements around Jean-Luc Brunel's availability.
This wasn't a casual friendship where you might bump into each other on the street.
No. This was a coordinated operation, a schedule being synchronized between the financier in New York and his man on the ground in Paris. They needed to be in the same city at the same time for a reason.
Which brings us to the commercial vehicle for this operation. We've talked about the real estate, we've talked about the personal coordination. Now we need to look at the business front.
The entity known as MC2 Model Management.
And this is where the forensic accounting really becomes critical to understanding what was going on.
It's everything, because on the surface, MC2 was a legitimate modeling agency. It had an office, it booked girls for magazines, for runways, it had a presence.
But the financial structure underneath it.
It was completely artificial. The company was founded in 2005. Now, the public face of the company, the ownership documents, listed Jean-Luc Brunel as owning 85%. Another man, Jeffrey Fuller, was listed as president.
But that's not where the money came from.
Not the seed money, no. The documents from J.P. Morgan Chase, Epstein's bank, tell a very different story about where the initial capital originated.
The bank records confirm that Jeffrey Epstein provided $1 million in financing to start MC2.
$1 million. That injection is the foundational document for this entire part of the enterprise. It establishes that while Brunel was the face, the operator, Epstein was the bank.
And he wasn't just a silent partner?
He wasn't a partner in the traditional sense at all. He was the debt holder. That's a crucial distinction. The internal accounting shows that by 2009, the agency, MC2, owed Epstein exactly $824,598.
Which creates an incredible amount of leverage.
It creates absolute leverage. It's total control. Brunel wasn't just a business partner who could walk away. He was financially beholden to Jeffrey Epstein.
In the architecture of a criminal conspiracy, debt is a tool.
It's a primary mechanism of control. If Brunel ever steps out of line, if he doesn't deliver, that loan can be called in. The agency would instantly collapse. Brunel would be ruined. Epstein effectively owned the man who owned the agency.
But what's even more striking in the accounting records is the expense column.
Yes. Epstein's own accountant, a man named Rich Kahn, performed a review of the MC2 books. And he flagged something very specific.
Brunel's scouting expenses.
And he used language that, for an accountant, is incredibly strong. Kahn called the scouting expenses astronomical based on your sales.
Let's pause on that. What was the figure?
Roughly $400,000 annually.
$400,000 a year. For one-man scouting, we need to break down what that actually means in the context of a small agency like this.
Okay, so in the modeling industry, scouting involves travel, of course. You fly to, say, Brazil or Eastern Europe. You stay in a hotel. You might pay for some test photo shoots for potential models.
There are legitimate costs.
There are. But even if you are flying first class and staying at the Four Seasons everywhere you go, $400,000 is a massive, massive amount of overhead for a single scout.
That's over $1,000 a day, every single day of the year.
Exactly. And the most critical part of Rich Kahn's note, the part that makes this a forensic red flag, is the phrase, based on your sales.
Meaning the agency's revenue simply didn't justify that kind of spending.
Not even remotely. If you spend $400,000 to find new talent, that talent needs to then go on to generate millions of dollars in booking fees to make the business model work. MC2 wasn't doing that. It wasn't a top-tier agency generating that kind of revenue.
So forensically, the question becomes, what was that $400,000 actually purchasing?
It's a classic red flag for misappropriation of funds. Or for a front company.
How so?
When you see expenses that are completely disconnected from revenue generation, the money is almost always being used for off-the-books, non-business activities. Scouting becomes a euphemism.
A line item to hide other costs.
Precisely. That money has to go somewhere. It could be covering the travel and living costs of young women who are never actually booked for a single legitimate modeling job. It could be for hush money. It could be lifestyle maintenance to keep Brunel loyal and happy.
But from a purely accounting perspective, it made no business sense.
Zero business sense. It only makes sense if the product being scouted wasn't actually for the modeling agency, but was being procured for the agency's financier.
And on top of these bizarre expenses, the agency itself appeared to be in serious financial and regulatory distress.
Yes. Despite this huge financial backing from Epstein and the massive scouting budget, we have records of federal tax liens being filed against MC2.
What do those show?
Between 2009 and 2010, the IRS filed federal tax liens totaling $593,789 against the agency.
So they weren't paying their taxes.
They were failing to meet their most basic legal obligations as a company, and this is happening at the same time they're spending $400,000 a year on Brunel's scouting.
That disparity is the key, isn't it?
It is. It paints a very clear picture. They have enough cash flow for Brunel to fly around the world nonstop, but not enough to pay the IRS.
It suggests the priority wasn't building a profitable, compliant modeling business.
The priority was the scouting activity itself. The business was just a shell, a vehicle to facilitate the movement of people under a plausible cover story.
And there was also a regulatory issue in Florida, a licensing violation.
That's right. In September 2010, the state of Florida cited MC2 for operating without a talent agent license. This was for their Miami Beach location on Alton Road.
It might seem like a small thing, a paperwork issue.
But it's significant because it shows a pattern of disregard for regulatory compliance. They were operating a business that recruits young people, often minors, without the required state oversight or licensure. They were deliberately operating in the shadows while maintaining a public storefront.
But the most damning document we have regarding MC2 doesn't come from the IRS or the state of Florida. It comes from inside Epstein's own bank.
It does. We have a global security report from JP Morgan dated March 2011.
And this document is it's vital. We often talk about rumors or what people might have suspected. This is not a rumor.
No, this is not a media report. This is the bank's own internal security division, their own risk assessment in writing.
What did it conclude?
The JP Morgan Global Security Division concluded, and I'm quoting directly from their report, MC2 Model Management and Jeffrey Epstein engaged in racketeering that involved luring in minor children for sexual play for money.
I just want to read that one more time. Racketeering that involved luring in minor children for sexual play for money.
They used the specific loaded legal term, racketeering, RICO, and they explicitly described the mechanism, luring minor children.
This establishes that by March of 2011, the financial institution handling all the accounts for this operation knew exactly what the business model was.
They knew. They didn't just think it was shady or a risk. Their own investigators identified it as criminal trafficking of children.
And yet the banking relationship continued.
The relationship between JP Morgan and Jeffrey Epstein continued until 2013.
So for 2 more years.
For 2 more years, that is a documented, unambiguous institutional failure. The bank had an explicit finding of child trafficking and racketeering in its own files, and it continued to process transactions for the enterprise.
It speaks to the level of protection Epstein enjoyed.
It's astounding. Even when the bank's own compliance officers find the truth and write it down, the money just keeps moving.
So we have the apartment, the secure base. We have the front company with its completely fraudulent financials. Now we need to look at the transportation.
The bridge between Paris and the U.S.
How were these individuals moving back and forth? The flight logs from Epstein's private jets, particularly the one known as the Lolita Express, are key here.
The flight manifests provide the timeline. They provide the connective tissue that corroborates the trafficking allegations. We are looking specifically at flights going in and out of Paris airport.
Why Le Bourget?
Le Bourget is the primary airport for private and business aviation in Paris. It's not Charles de Gaulle. It's discreet, it's efficient, and it has far less scrutiny than a major commercial airport. It was the preferred European entry and exit point for the entire Epstein enterprise.
So let's look at a specific manifest, March 2001.
Okay, in March of 2001, we have a flight recorded arriving at Le Bourget. The passengers listed on that manifest are Virginia Roberts, who is now known as Virginia Giuffre Ghislaine Maxwell, and Jeffrey Epstein.
This is a critical data point.
It's incredibly critical because Virginia Giuffre has consistently alleged that she was trafficked to France and abused there. This flight log places the primary accuser in Paris with both of the ringleaders, the financier and the lead recruiter, at the exact time frame of her allegations.
It moves her testimony from just an allegation to a
geographically corroborated fact. Her presence in Paris on his jet is documented.
Then there's another manifest from June 2002. This one adds another key name to the passenger list.
This manifest is particularly dense. It's like a snapshot of the entire operation in midair. It lists Virginia Roberts, Ghislaine Maxwell, Sarah Kellen, and Jean-Luc Brunel, all on the same aircraft.
And Sarah Kellen was Epstein's scheduler and executive assistant in the U.S. operations.
Correct. So on this one flight, you have the entire supply chain represented. You have the scheduler, Kellen, who manages the victims' calendars. You have the primary recruiter, Maxwell, who manages the victims themselves. You have the European procurement agent, Brunel, who sources the girls. And you have the victim, Roberts.
It establishes the nexus. It proves they weren't living separate lives in separate spheres.
They are sitting in the same cabin, crossing the Atlantic together. This proves Brunel isn't just some arm's-length business associate in Paris. He is part of the core traveling entourage.
We also see logs of Brunel traveling on the jet without Epstein. On May 21, 2003, the log simply lists Jean Elou flying from Le Bourget to JFK in New York.
And that indicates his utility to the operation. He's being shuttled to New York, presumably for business related to MC2, or perhaps to deliver assets or information directly. It shows the jet was a tool for the business, not just Epstein's personal toy.
Then we have what's documented as the European tour in the logs, October and November of 2003.
Yes, the Boeing 727 flies a very specific route. Palm Beach to JFK, then to Paris-Le Bourget, then to Brussels, then Oslo, and finally Stockholm.
And the passengers include Maxwell and Kellen.
It looks like a procurement tour, a scouting trip, but not for legitimate models.
The frequency is what stands out.
It really does. Brunel is documented on at least 24 flights between the years 2000 and 2005 alone. This wasn't an occasional visit or a one-off business trip.
This was a commuter route.
It was a transatlantic corridor, a shuttle service. Paris was the European hub, and Epstein's jet was the shuttle bus. The sheer frequency of the flights suggests a high volume of activity, a high volume of movement.
We've mentioned the word luring, which J.P. Morgan themselves used. I want to drill down into the mechanics of that. How did the modeling trap actually work?
The FBI files and some witness emails give us a very clear picture of the methodology.
It all relied on the power and allure of the fashion industry.
Absolutely. For a young girl, maybe from a poor town in Eastern Europe or a favela in Brazil, a contract with a Paris modeling agency is the dream. It is the golden ticket out.
And they exploited that dream. We have a July 2011 email from a young woman. She's writing to Epstein about getting the right paperwork.
She writes, and this is a direct quote, "If Jean-Luc can get me an invitation as soon as possible."
She's talking about an invitation letter.
Correct. In the context of international travel, particularly for entering the Schengen area in Europe, an official invitation letter from a registered business, like a modeling agency, is often a required document to secure a visa.
So MC2 was using its corporate status to issue these letters.
It was a visa mill. It allowed these young women to bypass the standard and much tougher immigration scrutiny. They weren't entering France or the U.S. as tourists who might get questioned. They were entering as models with a documented, legitimate business sponsor.
Which is, by definition, visa fraud, if the intent was never legitimate modeling work.
It's using a corporate shell to facilitate human smuggling, plain and simple.
And once the girls arrived, the control mechanism shifted.
It shifted to housing. This is a classic trafficking tactic. It's often called debt bondage.
How did it work?
The models would be housed in apartments that were owned or controlled by Epstein or his associates, the apartment in Avenue Foch being one of them. And they were often charged exorbitant rent for a shared room.
So they were in debt from the moment they landed.
Immediately. Imagine you are a 17-year-old girl. You land in New York or Paris, you don't speak the language well, and on day one, you are told you owe your benefactor thousands of dollars for rent, for your flight, for those scouting expenses we talked about. You are trapped.
You can't leave.
You can't leave because you owe them money. You can't go to the police because they are the ones sponsoring your visa. They hold all the power.
The FBI 302s, which are the summaries of interviews conducted by agents, they provide very specific details on the demographics of the girls Brunel was targeting.
The FBI documents are chilling, and they are very specific. One 302 summary states that Brunel brought girls to Epstein who had poor English language skills and appeared to be very young.
Both of those things are key trafficking indicators.
They are textbook indicators. The language barrier is a critical component of control. If you don't speak English or French fluently, you are entirely dependent on your handler for everything.
And the age.
Witnesses who were interviewed by the FBI, whose testimony is cited in these files, specifically mention seeing girls brought in by Brunel as young as 16.
But there is one specific allegation in the FBI files that stands out even from that: the birthday gift.
Yes, this is one of the most disturbing single entries in all of the publicly available files. A specific FBI account details an incident where a witness alleged that 3 12-year-old girls from France were sent to Epstein as a birthday gift.
And the source of that information believed Brunel provided them.
The source belief, as documented by the FBI, is that these 3 children were provided by Jean-Luc Brunel.
3 12-year-olds.
That is the allegation contained in the federal files. And it speaks to the level of depravity, but also the specific commodity that Brunel was allegedly sourcing. These weren't 19-year-old runway models who were being exploited. These were children.
And the phrasing is so intentional. Birthday gift.
It implies they were property, objects to be given, used, and then presumably discarded.
And this pattern of behavior from Brunel wasn't new. It didn't start when he met Epstein. We have to look back even further.
All the way back to a 1988 investigation by the CBS program 60 Minutes.
So decades before Epstein financed him.
Decades. Epstein didn't corrupt some clean, legitimate businessman. In 1988, 60 Minutes aired a big investigation into corruption and abuse in the fashion industry, and it implicated Brunel and his associates directly.
What were the allegations then?
The allegations in that report were that they drugged and sexually assaulted models. This was public information. It aired on national television. It was an open secret in the fashion industry that Jean-Luc Brunel was a predator.
So when Epstein gave him $1 million to start MC2 in 2005,
he was knowingly financing a man with a well-established public record of predatory behavior.
He didn't find a predator. He bought one.
He bought one. He financed an existing infrastructure that was already perfectly predisposed to the kind of exploitation he required. He didn't have to teach Brunel how to do this. Brunel was already an expert. Epstein just provided the capital to scale the operation up globally.
There's also a letter from an attorney dated September 2010 that explicitly connects the modeling promises to the abuse.
Yes, this piece of correspondence alleges that girls who were visiting Epstein's homes for massages were explicitly promised jobs at MC2 and with Victoria's Secret.
It confirms the quid pro quo.
It lays it out perfectly. The massage, which we know from extensive victim testimony was a euphemism for sexual acts, was the price of admission for the modeling career.
The career was the bait.
And the abuse was the transaction. Submit to this and you'll get the modeling contract. That was the pitch.
So we have this absolute mountain of documentary evidence. We have the bank knowing about racketeering in 2011. We have the 60 Minutes report from 1988. We have the flight logs, the financials, the FBI files. And yet, there is this massive gap in the timeline of justice.
We call it the lost decade. The J.P. Morgan report identifying racketeering is dated March 2011. Jean-Luc Brunel was not arrested until December of 2020.
A 9-year gap.
9 years. 9 years where a major financial institution knew what was happening. Law enforcement, for whatever reason, did not or could not act. And during those 9 years, that pipeline remained open. The MC2 agency continued to operate. The jets continued to fly.
The arrest finally happened on December 16th, 2020. And the circumstances are telling.
Very telling. Brunel was detained by French police at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris.
As he was trying to leave the country.
He was attempting to board a flight to Senegal. Now, Senegal is significant because it has no extradition treaty with France.
He's running.
He was clearly running. He knew the walls were closing in, especially after Epstein's arrest and death in 2019 and Maxwell's arrest in July 2020. He was trying to liquidate his presence in Europe and disappear into a jurisdiction where he couldn't be touched by French law enforcement.
And the charges filed against him by the French prosecutors were extremely severe.
They were. The charges included rape of minors, sexual assault of minors, criminal association, and human trafficking.
This was clearly being taken very seriously by the French authorities.
Extremely seriously. We have access to some internal Department of Justice emails from January 2021. They discussed the coordination with the French authorities on the case. And the DOJ officials noted in the email that it was pretty unusual that 3 separate investigating judges have been assigned to the Brunel case.
What does that signify in the French legal system?
It signals a case of the highest national priority and complexity. Assigning 3 judges means they were looking at a sprawling criminal enterprise with international dimensions, not just a single isolated offender.
The French lead judge also expressed concerns about information getting out.
Yes, after a Paris newspaper ran an article about the investigation, the judge was worried about confidentiality and leaks. This shows they were concerned about the larger network. They knew Brunel wasn't working alone and were worried that leaks could tip off other associates or lead to the destruction of evidence.
And they were actively trying to connect their case to the evidence seized in the U.S.
They were. The French prosecutors formally requested access to all the records that were seized from Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in the July 2019 raid and from the Little St. James Island raid in August 2019. They were trying to build a solid bridge between the American evidence and their French suspect.
But that bridge was never fully built in a public court of law.
No. We come to the end of the line for Jean-Luc Brunel.
February 19, 2022. He was an inmate at La Sante prison in Paris.
And he was found dead in his cell.
The official ruling was suicide by hanging.
And the parallels to Epstein's death in August 2019 were drawn immediately and universally.
2 key figures, both holding the secrets to the entire international network, both dying in custody before they could face a trial.
Both men dying by hanging in high-security prison facilities that were supposed to be monitoring them.
And the legal impact of Brunel's death was immediate and final.
It was. In France, as in many legal systems, the death of a defendant results in what's called abatement of the criminal prosecution. The case is simply closed. It's over.
There's no trial.
No trial, no public airing of the evidence. And this is a devastating legal technicality for the victims. It means all the evidence gathered by those 3 investigating judges, the invitation letters, the MC2 financial records, the witness testimony about the 12-year-olds, none of it was ever tested or presented in open court.
It all remains sealed in the investigative files.
Exactly. There is no public verdict. There is no official judicial record of guilt. The case just stops.
So let's synthesize this.
Yeah.
When we put all of these documents together, the Avenue Foch emails, the MC2 ledgers, the JP Horgan report, the flight logs, the FBI interview summaries, what is the final picture that emerges?
The picture is of a finely tuned, multinational corporate structure designed for one purpose. Paris wasn't a side project or a vacation spot. It was a primary supply line.
The mechanism seems so clear when you lay it all out.
It is. Step 1, finance. Epstein provides the capital, the $1 million to start MC2. Step 2, logistics. MC2, as a registered company, provides the cover story and the paperwork, the invitation letters and visas.
Step 3,
The
transport.
private jets provide the transport, moving the assets across the Atlantic away from commercial airline scrutiny. Step 4, control. The Epstein-owned real estate provides the housing, which in turn creates the debt bondage.
And step 5, cover.
The accounting provides the cover. The trafficking costs, the flights, the payments are all hidden in plain sight as $400,000 a year in scouting expenses.
It was a machine.
A well-funded, well-organized machine designed to traffic minors under the perfect guise of the international fashion industry. And it operated for decades because the very institutions that are supposed to spot these red flags, like the banks, documented them internally but ultimately failed to stop the flow of money that fueled it all.
The failure wasn't from a lack of information.
It was a profound lack of action.
So the documents clearly established the financial ownership of MC2. They established the physical presence of victims on flights to and from Paris and the specific role of Brunel as the key European procurement agent.
That is all documented beyond any reasonable dispute. What remains undocumented and what is perhaps lost forever are the specific identities of those 3 12-year-olds mentioned in the FBI files.
And with the abatement of the French trial, we may never know the full true scale of the visa fraud. We'll never know exactly how many women and girls were moved through that apartment on Avenue Foch.
The files exist. The evidence was gathered. But the justice system has closed the docket. The silence that Jeffrey Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel enforced so brutally during their lives has now, in a way, been permanently maintained in their deaths.
Next time, Island Corruption, how the Caribbean became his haven.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.